Hello, everybody.
Yay!
Welcome. It's Saturday morning here, Saturday afternoon elsewhere. Uh, we have our full crew here today to talk about a couple upcoming PvP centric MMO slash MMORPGs coming up. And we'll start off with quick introductions. I'm Sog. I'll be here every other week. Happy you guys made it. Thanks for coming. Um, you guys can just take turns. I'm tired this morning.
Yeah, it's early.
I'll tell you what. Since I wasn't here for the first one, I'll introduce myself. Hello, the internet. I'm Luck. I really like MMOs and talk about them incessantly in various places. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. I've actually just realised this is the first time I've been on one of these shows where I have been physically intimate with all of my co-hosts. By that I just mean hugging.
I don't know.
Outside of the clothes. That's an English phrase that we use.
Read into this as much as you would like.
I just realised that all of us have had a lovely cuddle with all three of you.
And
all the way over on across an ocean. So that's my claim to fame. If anyone watching might be jealous of that, I've gently stroked Zube's hair. I gazed up at Uni, waving to get her attention. She is the tallest human after all.
Everyone's good at something,
Yeah.
It's nice when it's an inherent feature, that it's not necessarily a skill. You're just naturally the best.
Naturally. Although, of course, Uni has many other wonderful qualities, as all my co-hosts. So, I guess that'll do for an introduction.
That was a long one, man. I got nothing now.
I'm sorry.
Good talk.
Okay, I'm Zube. You might see me on Twitter occasionally, tweeting out random things. I play a lot of MMOs, and I talk about MMOs a lot. Okay.
Cool. I am Super Fancy Unicorn. Please just call me Uni. Lately, I've been actually obsessed with Heroes of the Storm. I didn't think I'd ever get so into a MOBA, but I love it. It's the best. But I also stream other things. For example, yesterday I was playing Five Nights at Freddy's 3, aka Jump Scare Simulator 3 2015, which was fun. So I also have a blog at superfancyunicorn.com, and I'm just a turbo nerd in general. So
it's funny you mention Heroes, because I've never been I've been fascinated by MOBAs and everything, and I played enough Dota to feel like I understand it. But it was actually Heroes of the Storm was the first time I felt like I went into the game and had fun immediately, without having to kind of go through a horrifying process. I still got yelled at in Russian.
Well, it wouldn't be a MOBA without that. I mean.
Well, I couldn't understand the words, but it still felt just a little bit more friendly.
Inside, you heard "die feeder."
Well, that's the thing. I was like, oh man, I think I was like 11-0 at this point, and they were complaining. Oh, it doesn't matter anyway. But yeah, it's a fun game. It's really good.
Mm-hmm.
So today, or in the last couple weeks, we've heard a little bit about some crafting systems. We're waiting on some more information from Camelot Unchained, but we did get the video about their skill crafting system, and we got a lot of information about Crowfall's alloy and crafting system coming up. And I started thinking about, so these games, both of them talk about wanting to make sure that crafted items are the best, wanting to do the best they can. You really create a crafted world. That crafters need to be important. And thinking about how the fact that they're PvP-centric games really lends itself to that. What do you guys think about this concept?
Well, I think at the very kind of bedrock of these systems, to create a truly meaningful crafting system, in my opinion, you need to have a player-based economy. You need to first set up an economy that is based on what players are actively doing. Whereas in a lot of PvE games, predominantly PvE games that we see, a lot of the items that are entering the economy are coming from PvE content rather than being generated by the players in the first place. So I think that a fundamental difference, if you're talking about a PvP-centric open kind of game, is the fact that since the players are the content to begin with, it's that interaction between them that is generating the items that then go into the economy. Whereas in a PvE game, it's almost like a top-down thing in a PvE game. Like the items are kind of being sprinkled down from above, whereas in a PvP game, it's all based on the interactions of players. And I think that's the fundamental difference that allows a PvP game to approach the economy in a different way. I'm going to start rambling if I carry on, so, that thought does go somewhere. We'll get to it eventually.
Yeah, I'll go on record saying I hate crafting in MMOs. Like, I just find it boring and horrible because I feel like it takes you out of playing the game to go, okay, I'm gonna go, tink, tink, tink on an ore over here and then sit in Ironforge and smelt things forever. It's boring to me. So...
Sometimes I can. It's funny you say that because I consider myself to be a non-crafter. I'm like, I'm too busy playing the game to be. But if there's like flowers to pick, I'm all about. Like I can. It's like a disease. I can barely play Skyrim because I've got a bag full of red mountain flowers. I can't walk 2 feet. I'm like butterflies. So yeah, I don't know. Like gathering, like hoarding things in that way is a big part. It's a big part for me. So it's funny you should mention that. But yeah, very complex crafting systems. I'm not.
Well, I always have grand plans that, especially I make a lot of alts because I like trying out different classes. So I'm like, okay, this one I'm going to start from the beginning and level 1 and make all the things. I end up with a bank full of like copper and nothing. So.
Copper and nothing. Well, I do engage to the point. I normally find that in any game, like the first set of gear that you can make is worth making. And then everything in between that first set, in like PvE-centric, everything between that first set and the end game stuff, like the entry-level end game stuff, is just there's no point to it in actual game terms other than just existing to create progression for this crafting system.
Yeah.
I hate that.
But you mean you don't need 80 belts? Who doesn't?
There's also that unnecessary grind of it. It's like that you don't ever need to be doing this, apart from maybe, I don't know, in World of Warcraft you do it because you want the passive. You level up your crafting, which means that the amount of grind time going in to get your small percentage bonus, your little healing bonus from herbalism or whatever it is, it's intense because you're not getting a whole lot out of it.
I think they actually got rid of that. The little tiny bonus that you used to get, I think it's gone now.
Okay. Shows how much I know.
Why are you not totally up to the minute on World of Warcraft?
Jeez, dog.
I don't know how.
It's so embarrassing.
I don't know if I could catch up. But,
I'm sure you can. No problem.
But yeah,
it's funny though, isn't it? Because it plays into the idea of PvP games that have this. It's another difference between PvE and PvP-centric games, in that PvE games benefit from having a very vertical progression and that power differential being exponential. So within a crafting system, it means that you're out-leveling stuff so quickly, and it needs to be tiered at the same time. So we have a bank full of copper, then a bank full of iron, then a bank full of steel, then it keeps going up to the made-up ones at the top. But in a PvP... sorry, I'm not very well. In a PvP centric game, you don't want to have that vertical progression because you can't afford to segregate players in the same way. So if you end up with a much more horizontal plane, crafting immediately becomes much more attractive because the players who are just coming in can be very beneficial to veteran players that have been around for a long time. Like in EVE Online is a classic example of that. I talk about EVE Online so much. I've been playing it again this week.
Oh no.
Oh man.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. It's just a glorious thing that flies at my face and won't leave me.
There's also, I think, in a PvE centric environment, there's this feeling of when I earn something, I should have it forever. Now, lots of players and lots of games have this feeling, but I think that that when you make a game PvP centric, you can build in more of an understanding that you might not have that sword tomorrow, and it's not like I got this sword because I just killed the biggest, baddest boss, and I need to be able to show this off forever. Look at me, by the power of Grey Skull.
I know that like in the general kind of MMO community, this isn't a popular opinion, but I actually think that was one of the worst things to happen to MMOs. This idea that somehow once you get something, you've earned it or you deserve it and you have to have it forever, I think is completely anathema to the concept of what an MMORPG is. And although it is my belief, and the Crowfall guys have been talking about this a lot actually, like when they talk about item degradation and losing items, they reference Minecraft. And that's the thing now, is the generation of players that are going to be 5 years time will probably be picking up MMOs and playing them. They grew up playing Minecraft. They're used to this system where nothing's permanent. Things get broken. You lose things. A creeper blows up your doorway and you have to rebuild it. You don't get any instructions, but nighttime comes and a zombie eats your face and you don't know what to do about it. And it's very interesting to me how I think in 5 years' time there's going to be if the medium doesn't spread out or continue to spread in the way that it is, there's going to be a lot of I think that they're going to start making games for old people. That's what I think is going to happen. They're going to start making the big games, the big MMO experiences are going to be for the young crowd coming through. They're going to make games for old people.
Actually, I read in an article that WoW is huge in nursing homes because you have nothing but time.
Yeah.
Wow. The Dark Age of Camelot had item degradation too. It was kind of interesting how they did it. You could repair it, but it would lose, I think it was quality. I think it was either quality or durability. I had two of those, and as you kept on repairing it, it would be it was do less damage and it would have less stats on it. So you would, usually it got down to 90%, you're like, I want a new weapon now. So it wouldn't even matter by the time you even got to, nobody would get to 0 because they would just want new stuff to be the best.
Yeah, and that's what you need, isn't it? It's another thing going back to crafting. It's that cycle that you need. It's things becoming obsolete on a very rapid timescale, because it happens in PvE games, it happens in theme park games. Every time a new expansion comes out, every time a new raid wing comes out, all of that old gear, totally useless. Throw it all away. It's barely, you if you can be bothered, you vendor it. But it's totally worthless. It's totally worthless. But people don't consider that to be an item obsolescence strategy. They don't consider that to be items being taken away from them, even though their item goes from best in slot to basically worthless, and they don't care. Whereas, as Zube, you were saying, you get that gradual tick down, and eventually you get to the point where you go I want a new one now. I want something new and shiny. I think it's funny that it's all about presentation. People just don't make the connection.
There has to be also this possibility of, I'm looking for the best possible piece of armor to wear, but you know what? If I can't find that or I can't afford it right now, there's something close. You know, there's another alternative. When you have this long vertical progression of permanent items, you know, you have to have the best one. You know, you're trying to fill out your best in slot ring instead of looking for what's available and what you can have, and how you can go out and accomplish something and maybe finish the day in a slightly better situation than you were in before for your team and for your own setup. But what I hate this is, if I ever see somebody put all of their gear in the bank and run out to go harvesting naked because they're afraid to lose their gear, the game is bad. The game, the game is bad if anyone even thinks that that's a good idea of something to do. That you should feel like you need to be dressed.
Yeah, that's true. I don't.
What if you want to commune with nature while you pick flowers?
Well,
then
you
what?
can commune with nature and die.
Circle of life?
Yeah.
I think both Camel Unchained and Crowfall have something good here with not having levels. So they have the horizontal scaling, so crafting is just going to be more... It's just going to be better because you won't have to have a level 1 through 80 type of scaling when it comes to crafting. It will just be certain stats you want, or certain buffs or whatever each item will give you, instead of trying to get the best.
Well, I just put up the
you're right.
Crowfall.
I think it goes back.
I just put up the Crowfall alloy list and that they put out and what that means. We could talk more in depth about how vertical and how horizontal the system can scale.
It does seem to be, as you were saying before, you being able to use different materials with the same recipe. It's definitely something that I think it's very fashionable in a lot of MMOs that are coming up at the moment, to have a recipe and then say, you know, what particular, okay, so you need some wood, but what particular type of wood are you going to use? Are you going to use wood that's very strong and heavy? Are you going to use wood that's, you know, that's reflective of that? And it's based on the materials that you use that create the stat distribution on the item, but all of the materials themselves don't have any greater or lesser intrinsic value within themselves, or they're not, the majority of them aren't necessarily harder to acquire, but it's just about getting the right thing for what you personally want as a character. And I think that's a really big part of, you know, creating that depth in a crafting system, and I'm really pleased about it, to be honest. I'm glad that we're coming around to that again.
Mm-hmm.
So with that, I think that the variation, when you make the variation a function of how you're combining different items, you increase the potential number of permutations naturally anyway. So you don't need to have copper helm, bronze helm. You have a helm and you have all of these different ways of doing it, and then they come out with a variety of different specific attributes. Now, and you know that it's not going to last forever, so what you may want for your next helm could be different to what you have now, or you could be willing to settle for something a little bit different because that's what's available and someone had made, or those are the materials you had. But how do we feel about this? And Crowfall seems to be leaning this way, this gear-based spec system, like the passive abilities that you get from... I understand gear having different quality attributes, so like a little bit more defense or different weight that may affect your movement speed. This idea that if something is made out of a different alloy, you gain crit chance or something. How do we feel about that?
Well, I think that's part of the nature of the build system, isn't it? They want players to have variety in how they can build their character, and the way to do that with the game as they're making it is through crafting. I mean, we can, you can talk about whether that's realistic or not, but I think it's somewhat a moot point, isn't it? It comes down to what the design of the archetypes that they have and the branches that they go off. Although something you said then, being able to play an archetype at all is down to having the specific gear. I thought that's an interesting position then, because it could potentially be an answer to people running around naked. Like if you think about, you could run around naked as one particular class, but if you want to play a different kind of path on that archetype, then you would have to have certain items on you at a time. I don't know. That's just a thought I had while you were talking.
If you're not equipping the spear, you're not the sentinel.
Yeah, exactly.
That makes sense, though, from an immersion standpoint, I would say.
Still wouldn't stop anyone from doing it while mining, though, or anything like that. And they wouldn't care what class they were, right? They were just...
Yeah.
Well, but to kind of maybe move it along, what about people who just want to craft? Or just be like a merchant, I want to be like the best blacksmith in the game. Is there room for that in a PvP MMO?
I think that the way both of these games are approaching it, there very much is. That the ability to craft items will even be partially tied to your class or archetype in Camelot Unchained and in Crowfall. And this, specifically with Crowfall, what's going to be interesting is because you can't necessarily take everything with you in and out of campaigns, that you're going to have people that want to sit in their eternal kingdoms doing crafting and trying to build little trade empires. Yeah,
that's the crafting animation.
Yeah, and but there's also going to be this really cool job of people that have crafting abilities to the detriment of their combat abilities, because you're not going to be able to have everything, but they're going to be needed in the campaigns. So they're going to be people that, like, we want to defend, to keep safe, and build up a little base to help house, and it ends up then glorifying the crafter. So like it's like protecting your healer. It's protecting your guy that's in charge of keeping you supplied. Now, if a campaign is 3 months long, you may go through, 8-10 different weapons, depending on how, what resources become available, what you're allowed to bring in, and what breaks. You need to make sure that you're taking care of the people that are making them, and you won't be able to do it yourself.
I think that the biggest point for me there is, if you want to have specialists, then you need the infrastructure to support it. As the looser your organization is, like, people need to be more general if it's not, but the more cohesive your team becomes, you can start doling out very, very specific jobs. And I think that it might be a compromise for some people, but I think if you did just want to be a kind of pure crafter and have that as your main focus, you'd need to attach yourself to other people, because you'd need to find your market, number one, wouldn't you? And then you'd probably do best finding the group that didn't want to get involved in crafting, they just wanted to go out and fight. And there's a lot of those people that play these games. I know them. They're generally the ones that yell a lot over TS, I find.
I'm sorry.
Camelot Unchained has crafting classes. So you don't want to play as one of those classes if you want to craft. And then they branch off into, I think, it's either armor and weapons and siege or building. Yeah. So you'd want to make friends with crafters that way and follow them around and guard them in like the RVR areas so they can build their siege weapons and try to take over the other territories. They're not going to be as powerful as the other classes, so you're going to want to defend them. But I feel like it's going to be pretty interesting seeing how that works out.
Yeah. Well, I think it's great that they have two So it's like they have the crafting class, they have the builders and everything, but there's almost two different play styles within that go beyond crafting. So you've got someone who says, I want to specialize in crafting. Then you go, that's great. Do you want to be, in the rear with the gear? Do you want to be making stuff back there? Or do you want to be on the front line? Do you want to be in the fight? Do you want to be part of it, making the fortifications out there at the front? So I think that's great, thinking about crafting as being integral to the active play experience rather than a downtime activity that you just do in a city. I think that's a really great step, and I hope it's something that gets emulated as much as possible.
Well, I also like the concept, like we were talking about last time, where games like WoW have made it so you basically don't have to really talk to anyone ever if you don't want to, or play with anyone. You don't need a guild, you don't need anything. You can just, you have these little pre-made experiences set up for you. Whereas if you specialize in crafting, you're going to need to rely on other people, and vice versa. I think the fighters are going to need to rely on you. So you kind of build up relationships with people and actually play together in an MMO. Strange concept. But
you so crazy.
I know. But I think that'll be cool.
Camelot
I
Unchained
think
is doing something that I've really only experienced in Repopulation. I don't know if the rest of you guys have touched that game at all, but in Repopulation, there's something similar to Camelot Unchained's ability crafting system that we saw the video of last week, where you can specialize. You can not only take a piece of armor or a weapon and specialize it by adding runes and such, but you actually build your abilities to do specialized things. It adds this whole new level of complexity to, everyone has a slash, but my slash may be completely different to yours, depending on how I build it and how I put together. Now, what I'm interested in regarding crafting is taking that. There are crafting classes. So let's say my job is to build siege engines, but my siege engine building skills may be highly specialized to allow me to do something different. I'm wondering if there's this crossover, because we see it with the combat abilities, and how one combat ability can be very different. Do we think that being a crafter, you'll be able to specialize your crafting abilities that way to actually be, to stand out? Like, I am specifically built to be the best swordsmith that I could possibly be, and they're upfront saying it will be very difficult to respec and change things in Camelot Unchained. It's in one of their major "we believe this" design documents up front. Do you think? I don't know if there's a crossover.
I think they're definitely. I don't know. My first reaction was it's probably unlikely that those two systems are connected, but actually, the fact that there are dedicated crafting classes, that actually might be a really good reason for having that crafting class in the first place. Is you're not just taking a different archetype and building them towards being a crafter. You're starting as a crafter, so you're you're presumably the abilities that you have as a crafter would be built around those kind of things anyway. And if a big part of the game is like creating these spells, crafting these spells, then perhaps that's a big reason why they went in the direction of having a crafting class to begin with. So I hadn't thought about that. That's really interesting. I wonder what you could do. Speed things up, I guess, would be a big one. But then, how do you balance that out? I'm just wittering now. Sorry, I'll just talk to people.
I just think that's something that, if you're a crafter and like inside you feel like a crafter and you want to be the best crafter, finding some way to be able to demonstrate that you can do this one thing better than anybody.
Well, can you give us an example?
Like
what one thing?
Say, I make swords And when I make swords, it's highly unlikely that you're going to find somebody else making one better than I made. I am the guy that makes swords, and your name's on it. You are Hanzu. This is your and I feel like with the ability crafting system and being able to highly specialize an ability, that if that's applied to crafting, then that becomes possible. But if you are that sword guy, you're not the shield guy.
Yeah, I think it definitely works especially if you consider the crafting system in a much more granular way, like being able to craft the different alloys for a specific part of a specific weapon, and you could take that next step into specialization and say, like, I make the best armor for the Viking. What's the name of the class with the face on either side? I can't remember those guys. The Veil Walkers or something. I can't remember. So you say that, you go, I make the best possible armor for this specific class in this specific role. And once you start getting that kind of granular into it, you say, oh, well, to do that, you need to be able to make this particular material imbued with this particular property using this particular manufacturing technique. So then you go back to your crafting skills and you go, okay, so you have a generic cloth crafting ability, but then you can almost morph that ability and make a new one that lends itself much better to the specific attributes that particular class would want. So you start off with that, and then you move on to, okay, so now you need a specific thread for it, and you morph it, and you specialize and specialize and specialize, and find that niche. And I think that's a huge part, being able to find a niche. Uni's looking at me like I'm a crazy person.
I can see that you could do that, I guess, but would you want to? I guess my first thought was, oh my god, that sounds like the most boring thing ever. Just make the one thing over and over again forever.
That's what crafters are into.
Yeah,
I think that's the big thing. If you're doing it from an economic standpoint, rather than just like helping out your specific buddies, like your small guild, that if you want to be, it's like going back to EVE Online, I think is a great example of this. Is the people that are very successful are the ones that find a niche and just like hold on to it and don't let it go no matter what, and get into like one-isk bidding wars with people over the course of months to like hold on to it, and that's what it's all about, isn't it? That's the economic PvP.
Yeah.
It's this idea that if you want to make a crafter have the ability to outperform other players and stand out, you can't just have all the same abilities for everyone, and you can't just have exactly the same item. Like, you can't be a max level leather worker that is exactly the same as every other max level leather worker, or like Grandma's saying about alts. Then people will just make alts to level up leatherworking to the top. But then if you say, on top of this, so you have to be training your ability and you have to be getting better at it, but on top of this, you have to specialize even further. There may be people that everyone makes an alt to make the weapon that they specifically want for their main, but they're not going to make a different alt for their boots, and a different alt for their shield, and a different alt for their potions. And you make it so that players who really dedicate their time and their energy to doing something stand out. The reason alts work is that once you level it up, you don't have to touch it. You just feed it a resource, and it's like putting something into a machine and getting something back out. Yeah. Alts don't work if you have to play it like your main.
Yep. I know Camel Unchained is doing like a time-based leveling for crafting anyways. So if you make alts and it's not your main thing, you will always be behind anyone that's a main crafter. There's no money. You won't be able to just take a ton of money and just throw it and just get to max instantly. You won't be able to do that in this game. So
that's the way progression is kind of locked that way in Camelot Unchained, isn't it? Is that how the crafting progression works as well, Zube?
Yep.
I think you know more about it. So you get the... I've forgotten. This is on YouTube. This is on YouTube, so it's not NDA, but like, it's that thing where it's that you get to... Is it the end of the day? And then you get the breakdown of like how you've contributed.
I don't really know how that works, but I guess you will get your rewards and experience and stuff at the end of the day after you do everything.
Yeah. So it's not like if you just jumped on an ult for an hour to like you wouldn't be in the position where you'd be able to power level, would you? It's
Right.
not like you can just pound your face against quests or like do some dungeon runs or whatever. It's like you have to get out into the world and actually do useful things. So it's like Sugg said, you need to play it like it's your main in order to progress at a satisfying rate. Anyway, it's nice though. It's a neat little thing, and I'm glad because there's so much opportunity that's created from that. Like taking something that for some reason became very much a downtime activity and putting the spotlight back on it. I think it's very brave. It's a bold move. It's a bold move. What are we going on about?
What are we going?
Yeah.
We do have a question from Diggs we could take right now.
Wunderbar.
The question is, how does item progression / degradation affect level progression? I think that the systems that we're talking about are very horizontal, so I'm not sure that I understand.
I think it's a it's a question that applies the system to a different game model.
Mhm.
It's like you're trying to take a system from one game and a system from another game that are not intended to work together and asking how will these work together. It's like they don't. That's why they're not in the same game.
Yeah,
That's why it's the reason that crafting isn't a big deal in theme park games with exponential number-based progression. It's because it's not a compatible thing, so you have to take that type of level progression out. And you can still have levels. Like you can have a level, but what is a level system? It's an arbitrary numerical value to mark a certain progress in your character. So you can strip out certain things. You can take out the exponential numerical growth in leveling. Suddenly that becomes a lot more horizontal. But then if you still have a raiding progression type character leveling, then again you can't have the same sort of crafting progression in that. So it's it's just not. It's two different things, I guess.
So we talk about like the general scope of our show here is talking about PvP being in these upcoming games being contextually meaningful, especially in Camelot Unchained, where the game is about controlling and exerting influence over the world. That is what the game is about. So this idea that from a crafting perspective, that a prime crafter can be a real part of that war effort, I think it's essential that it's something that they have to get right. Otherwise, it's PlanetSide 2, right? It's PlanetSide 2 with different abilities, where it's a zone control battle game. When we add in this ability to specialize and become something else in a support role, not meaning like supporting a MOBA or supporting a combat class, but to care about what's behind the scenes and what's going on, your crafters at home, and needing to take care of that, I think is like really important. I used to say at World of Warcraft that a raiding guild is made when they're not in raids. Like, it's the people that are putting in the extra time to go grind out the potions and making sure that you have everything you need so that you're showing up for the raid prepared. I don't know if it's as much like that anymore, but instead we'll want to take care of people. Is this extra dynamic something special? Is it? I don't know how to phrase
think
this
it's-
the question.
I like to think of it with Camelot Unchained specifically because of it's always like a tri-realm thing, isn't it? So you've got this persistent three-way, like it's just always this kind of endless war going on forever, and it's almost like everything that you do, it's towards the war effort. Like anything that you can do that benefits your side, it's going towards the greater good. And but I did think it was interesting from the traditional crafting perspective, which is very economy based, the idea of a player economy, I assume in Camelot Unchained is going to be based just in your one faction, or is there going to be it's just all the economy is within your faction, right. And it's within your best interests to contribute to the war effort. So does this mean that the very capitalist based player economies that we've seen before, like the really ruthless end of like EVE Online, where it's all about just dicking people over constantly, now that we have this thing where everyone is working towards a common goal that benefits everyone, are we going from a kind of right to a left wing perspective on what it means to have a player economy?
I mean, are you saying you think that like guilds will just dick over each other trying to get is that...
Well, I think with people who like to play the economy, they like to show off how much they've made and how much they've got and that kind of thing, and because that's what playing the stock market is, isn't it? It's the guys who work in these banks, they do it, it's not about the money, it's about winning. It's about being at the top, and a lot of these economy guys. So I just think it's interesting that because contributing to the war effort, it's I don't know, maybe it's like a socialist principle of like everything that you're doing, the best thing that you can do with your own resources is then put that personal success back into the whole. I think it's just to me it's a possible interesting diversion from some other games that have had a player based economy where it's driven by that kind of capitalist ideal of having a billion-isk in the bank account and 10 titans lined up.
Well, we don't play other games where, or many other games where the other members of your faction are really on your team.
Yeah.
That if you're playing Star Wars: The Old Republic, just because you're a Jedi doesn't mean, or you're on the Jedi or Republic side, doesn't mean that you're friends with or care about the success about anybody else there. But when the whole game is around working together in a PvP combat situation like that, if you don't care, you're hurting people. Then you're the problem. So if you could actually hamstring your own realm by hoarding. That there's a limited amount of resources.
I think that'll happen. To be honest,
I think
people will do it.
But then you're the bad guy.
Yeah.
Well,
but I mean that's how that has happened in other games, isn't it? Where, like with Ruin did it in Guild Wars 2, and Goonswarm tried to do it with E, where these big guilds will just come into a game and just try and prove that they are the dominant ones. What was Neckrage's guild in Arcade? They did it as well. Orenthal in Arcade, they just go onto a server and just ruin everyone else's day and just be like
Arcade,
no one else
you want anyone ever you want. So I think in Dark Age of Camelot, anyways, it wasn't really like that. People actually worked together on their own realm, and it was about like a realm pride, and you wanted to just destroy the other realms and whatever. Occasionally, you would actually have realms team up against the other realms if they were too big for them. So you would have like the Midgard and Hibernias against Albion on my server, anyways, and we'd have to try to kill two realms at once. Usually, it wasn't about guild rivalries. There were some, but we actually try to help each other. So I
think that's great. Like, that's what I'm talking about. It's a different kind of player economy, then, isn't it?
Should be fun.
And then it'd be kind of fun though if you could sort of be a privateer, like whoever has the the money, they get your services. I don't think that would be a good mechanic, maybe necessarily, but it would be kind of fun from a.
In certain game modes in Crowfall, I think that's absolutely intended.
Crowfall's ideal for
Oh yeah, that's a good point. They have the different rule sets basically.
Yeah. So that's what I mean. Like in a game like Crowfall, certain game modes in Crowfall, or in a game like Eve, you're free to be very mercenary and self-interested in that way. I just think it's interesting with Camelot Unchained how it's a very different. I'm going to keep referring to it as a socialist ideal because it makes Americans uncomfortable, and that
no, it's
sorry.
I think that it's more of a like tribal ideal. That it, you know, I think that it's a little bit more like basic than a like socialist economy. No, it's just that if we want to survive, we have to work together. You know that.
Yeah.
But I think
I think tribalist is definitely a better way to describe it. But I will continue using socialist.
I think Crowfall's ideal for both of these ways of thinking, because it's the difference between are you an Eternal Kingdom crafter and economy focused person, or are you a campaign crafter? Because if you're joining, you know, God's Reach or the Infected or one of these areas where you're fighting for your god or your alignment, that when you're in there, it is that kind of like tribal thing where you're working together, and because the embargo and what you take out of there is contingent on how successful your group is for what you can take back from the campaign. But in the Eternal Kingdoms, you're going to have people who are playing the markets, you know, trying to, you know, turn their own little EK into the East Commons Tunnel and all of this stuff. That I think that's I think it opens up as long as the Eternal Kingdoms are given the support that people that want to play like that need, I can see a whole lot of different options. I can see an option in Crowfall this is a big if Eternal Kingdoms are given the support for people that are virtually non-combatant and just hang out but still satisfy a valuable role in the community through crafting and trading.
I think it's all going to be socio-political essentially, isn't it? Like the Eternal Kingdoms, it all comes down to propaganda. It comes down to whoever can attract the most people to their thing. So you know, Crowfall, Ko's going to stream it. Definitely, like that's going to happen. They've said there's not going to be an NDA or anything. So day one, when it's all open, Ko's going to be there. You know, however many thousand people watching, loads of people are going to jump in with him, and suddenly that's going to start growing. And as soon as that grows, you can attract like more and more people that way. So I actually hope that there's going to be various hubs competing with each other in that kind of way, because I think that'll be really interesting. And then seeing the guild alliances that form from that, because obviously you're going to have guild rivalries and they're not going to want to help each other, so they need to have separate areas to begin with, and then like how do relationships with other guilds within that or with other organizations within that, how does that work? And you create this really interesting political web, which I think is fascinating for this kind of game, for an MMO.
Yeah, that level of rivalry between people on the same team, like it's like Achilles has to be Achilles. You know, he has to be the greatest warrior of the Greeks, and if somebody else shows up and seems to be getting in the way, you know what? He has some character flaws, and that person might not make it till tomorrow. You know, this is my battle. This is my time to shine. I am going for it. I'm not helping you. I will not defend you because you're a rival.
And that happened in Guild Wars 2. Like in the early days of World versus World and Guild Wars 2, and like in the top tier on the EU, it was like we'd be out on like on an evening peak time, just having massive rows with other guilds on the server, just in general chat.
Oh, God.
What are you fighting? It was horrible. It was absolutely awful. I'm like, oh my God, some people took it way too far, and that's in a game that's it really is. It's a genuinely really friendly game, and ArenaNet have done a really good job in cultivating that environment from very early stages. But even within that, and it being as casual as it is, like, oh my God, I'm not going to start name dropping guilds, but my God, some of those guys, I wouldn't invite them around to meet my nan, is what I'm saying. They were on my team.
With crafting in Crowfall, I missed this. I don't know. Are they gonna have auction houses, or are they gonna try to sell stuff?
No.
No. It's like on Chain. There's no auction houses either.
Yeah.
But you'll be able to apparently build your own like shop and set up shop and put your things up for sale and stuff.
Yeah. I mean, I
I
think
had a
that's the
shop
biggest
in
part.
Galaxies. It was fun.
That is
Sorry.
cool.
I will always take an opportunity to talk about Galaxies.
Everyone always references Galaxies for the.
It was so great.
But
I loved
it's,
it so much.
It's Raf Costa was basically the design consultant for the economy and crafting for Crowfall, wasn't he? So a lot of the swig stuff is definitely going to be present. I think it's really interesting that especially in a game which is so built around player interaction being the content. That's really it. In Crowfall, that like I can't see, especially in a game of this size, I can't see there really being anything else to do. Like, I mean, there'll be mobs in the world, but that's it. So the other players are the content. So you need to really, you need to just grab that and milk it for all that it's worth, don't you? And that includes the way that the Eternal Kingdoms works, politics, propaganda, getting people to come to your place to get those taxes, and creating trade hubs, built on player interaction. It's lovely. It's a lovely aspiration, I think.
So we have, it looks like 2 questions and a little bit under 10 minutes left. We got another question from Diggs about
Quick fire round.
about item degradation. So why is item degradation useful for horizontal progression or a levelless system? Who wants to take that one?
Especially it's for the crafters. I mean, definitely. I mean, if they just make a certain amount of items and they never degrade, what are they gonna do then? Then they're never gonna be able to craft anything. I mean, once they craft the best things, apparently they won't be able to craft anything else, right? I mean, like,
I think
it needs to be destroyed eventually.
Yeah, the thing is, you need to take items out of the economy, and theme park games do this as well. They just do it on a much more extended time scale. If you imagine, okay, let's go back to WoW again because it's the obvious one. They have a 2-year expansion cycle, and at the end of that cycle, the quests that you do give you new gear that's better than the top tier raiding gear within minutes of going into that. You level up once you've completely replaced everything. So that means everything that you had before is utterly obsolete instantly. So that's item obsolescence. And that's the same with item degradation. And the reason why item degradation is more important for a horizontal game is because the amount of time it takes to progress to a point of being competitive is much shorter. So you have a 2-year cycle for World of Warcraft, and you have like a month for a horizontal progression game. So if you bring that time scale back for World of Warcraft, and you imagine the expansion comes out every month, a new raid wing comes out every month, you're cycling your gear at the rate of once per month. And in the horizontal progression game, you're cycling your gear at a similar rate. So it's the same thing, it's just on a different time frame.
And there's no sort of ultimate truths that you want to hang on to show off either. It's just you have a weapon that has characteristics. It's not you're not linking your Thunder Fury 8 years later.
Well, that's it. You can
Yeah.
you can still do a lot better than other people. Like if you get yourself into a situation where you're very well organized and you're with a group that goes that is very successful, then you can maintain a higher level of gear. Like maybe the ideal situation for me, I think, in an MMO would be, it is theoretically possible to have everything best in slot, but it is almost impossible to maintain that.
Yep.
With the degradation, which again is exactly the same as World of Warcraft. It's really hard, or not so much anymore, but like there was a time when it was really hard to have everything best in slot, but it would still cycle. So you'd still have to work really hard to maintain that once you got there. So it's the same horizontal progression. It's just on a much shorter time frame.
Kind of
That's
random.
the way that I see it.
Random.
Why is it
question for
random?
y'all. I was just thinking, what do y'all think about like cosmetic items? And is there room for that? Because I feel like some people just want to walk around looking like a badass, but it's like, I don't want to actually use my really cool sword, because what if it breaks and I don't get to, wave it around menacingly anymore?
I like cosmetic items for, there's something. It's nice that they can be monetized and not really affect the game, and companies can make money off it. But in a PvP environment, I want to be able to look at a character model and know what it can do. I don't want somebody in a Santa costume coming at me with an invisible double-bladed axe that really looks like a bag, a sack of toys. I want, as long as it's not taking away from my ability to understand my opponent. I don't care what, if people want to buy fancy looking skins for their characters, I'm all for it.
So you want the tank to look like a big armored dude and the casters to be in cloth and stuff like that, is what you're saying?
Whether it looks like cloth or metal or whatever, as long as I can still understand by looking at them what their potential actions are, I'm okay. If it's putting on a costume that can camouflage your combative nature, I don't think that's okay.
Well, there was a big thing about going back to Guild Wars 2 again. Actually, there was a big thing in that game because there was a potion you could get that was very cheap that made you look like a human ghost. It just made you translucent blue, but the model was always the same, no matter what race or class you were. Same gear, same same size, same everything. So obviously, in the massive tier 1 Zergs, where it's like 50 people, you get this like front line where it's like 30 people all using this exact same tonic. So they all look exactly the same, and you go,
that's funny.
Okay, where's the melee train? Where's where are the casters? Where where are the elementalists that are going to be dropping healing pills? Like you've got absolutely no idea, and it's not nice in terms of gameplay, I think, to come up against that. Although it is absolutely a trade-off, because I think customization is great, and I think that's definitely something that you lose a bit of in systems like this. Because best MMO item ever is Sloth Glider in Arcade, and I will go outside and fight anyone who challenges me on that. Have you guys seen it? YouTube Sloth Glider.
Okay.
You're welcome. It's incredible.
Arcade's just.
It has its own slash
last time.
I know.
The game made me. I have so much potential, and then it just dropped the ball. So.
Yeah, they really did. I think it's a game that had such a sort of identity crisis from the beginning, that the mismanagement from Tryon, I think, it's just a big mess. I don't want to talk about it, Zume. Why did you bring it up? It has its own dance animation. Slash dance.
Can you show us?
Didn't even need to be prompted. Sloth face like that.
I really did like the jail system. It was kind of broken, but it was fun to read the trials and stuff and see what people are talking about, and them getting into it. It was hilarious. That was good. But yeah, about the cosmetic thing, I honestly, as long as it's like Sog said, as long as it corresponds to their class, I don't want like a cloth wearer wearing plate armor, or being able to change their weapons, like their staff, to something that looks like a sword or something like that. I mean, I'm all for cosmetic items though.
It's hard, isn't it? Because it's such a grey area. And then, like you say, a lot of games now, like they get to a certain point in their cycle. Like even ESO, which I still hate, the Elder Scrolls Online, like they're already at the point where like they go for this like the realism thing or like the stylized fantasy realism of the Elder Scrolls world, but they've started selling costumes, which is one of the demon guys in a jester suit. So there's just loads of people running around in like full jester, like purple and white jester costumes with these big masks and like hats with bells on and everything. It's like it so undermines like the essence of the game that, I mean, you guys know I'm funny about the word immersion when it comes to MMOs, but when it's something like so that just thematically cuts through it like that, like that's one of the reasons I find the Sloth Glider so funny, because it's so stupid. Like it's a ridiculous thing. But yeah,
but isn't there room for stuff like that in games? I mean, does it have to be super serious pants all the time?
No,
I don't think it has to be super
all
serious.
Guild War, Kill Unchained, you know about the ducks that they always talk about. I don't know how it even became like their mascot, but they always have ducks everywhere, and people.
I remember I remember during the Kickstarter there was like one rubber duck in the background or something.
It's like 50 of them. People, all the back, just like here's some ducks. But
yeah, people were mailing like custom rubber ducks to them like during the campaign. It was funny though. Anyway. Cosmetic's a weird thing. It's a grey area, isn't it?
We got one more question before we wrap up that's a little bit off the topic we've had, but Paradox Moose asked, do you think the 5 distinct worlds / zones for Crowfall is a good idea, or is it a risky mechanic? It's the thing that makes me most excited about the game. That's my answer.
I think it's... I don't know. I think on the way that it's been presented so far, I think is very much a simplification of what they want to do with different rule sets for different environments. And I think the plan is to be extremely iterative with the way that rule sets work, and to have different rules and see what's popular and see what people like, and over time, you know, customize the campaigns, because you know it doesn't have to last forever, which is a big strength of the game in that way. It cycles constantly, and they can change it for different campaigns and see what works. And I think that the way that they've shown it is this very structured and discrete thing, I think is a little bit misleading. And to me, that means it's probably, I mean, if they get it really wrong in the early days, obviously there's going to be the backlash that there always is for every game. Because everyone's going to jump on this, even though it's not for everyone. Everyone's going to jump on it, and a lot of people are going to hate it. But, you know, if they can always iterate on it. So in the long term, I consider it to be a less risky strategy than just going like, this is our one game mode, and that's what we're sticking with. To be able to say, we got lots of different options. We're going to try lots of different things. We're going to see what works as it goes along. I think that's an excellent strategy for an MMO.
They also talked about it in their writing about it being a risk mitigation plan. Is it because everything's time limited, they can continually tweak things and they can make adjustments that campaigns that start on this date may have these kinds of features, but you know, as they see what's going on, they can be adjusting that ongoing instead of having to rethink how the whole world of the one world of the game works.
Yeah. It's cool. It's lots of they're really taking advantage of the opportunities that having the areas that are gonna be destroyed, like having an area that when someone wins, that area is not there anymore. You know, they're just really taking advantage of that, and I think that's great, because they're losing a lot of stuff that comes along with having a large, seamless, persistent world that, you know, I'm sure we've all enjoyed in other games and will again. But I think it's great that they're really taking advantage of what this system offers them, rather than trying to ate different systems that wouldn't make any sense for their game. It's good. It's cool.
The interesting thing about like the big seamless world you were talking about, though, Locke, is like some zones people just never go there anymore.
Yeah.
Like think about WoW. You know, like when's the last time? Where was that place? can't even think of the name of it, but like there's so many zones where you just never see anybody. It's literally a flyover zone.
Yeah. I did a thing about that recently. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I did a thing about that recently where I was talking about, it was Crowfall that made me think about it actually, the idea of having a much smaller scale MMO that was still based on the raiding endgame. So you could have the raiding endgame, and I was thinking, you know, if you took a traditional MMO and you took out all the leveling zones, you took out most of the dungeons, you basically just had faction cities and then raids in instances. Would that be something that a raiding community would get into? I think it's an interesting premise, because it's basically what Crowfall's doing with an open world PvP thing, and because they're limiting the scope to that, and Camelot Unchained as well, because they're limiting the scope to that, it means they can actually do a lot more for that one particular game type, rather than trying to stuff the game with 5 or 6 different core experiences that can't be expanded on. Everyone keeps laughing at chat, and I haven't even got the thing over.
Real quick, I just
so paranoid. I'm like,
the issue with having like ghost zones that happened on EverQuest a lot. It's sad because there was a lot of great zones in there, and World of Warcraft 2 is with the vertical progression is everything there is like level 10 or 15 to 20 or whatever. Nobody really, there's no point in going there anymore. But with these horizontal games coming out, it's going to be a little bit more. It's going to be less of an issue. People want to go there for resources and stuff now, and it'll be a lot better. I think.
You can still within that, you can have areas that are more dangerous. But all you do is, so you have your kind of central civilized areas, which is where players congregate, and then as you get further away from that, it just naturally becomes more dangerous. So it doesn't mean that the whole map is exactly the same difficulty. It just means that you can organize it in what I consider to be a more sensible way, save a lot of money as well.
I love that Crowfall is being designed by treating limitations and problems of games that they have made in the past as opportunities to make something cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's actually what excites me. That, like, Todd knows that there was a big problem with Shadowbane, and one of the big problems was that it never ended, right? And by saying, you know what, we don't have... These aren't givens. They aren't It isn't that we can't make the game that we want to play because we have to have these systems that make it really hard to do it. It's no, we can rethink that fundamental structure of the world that we're even going to play the game in, and build a world that fits the play style that we're envisioning. And I don't know, that's one of the things about Crowfall. I also like that they're licensing technologies so that they can focus on gameplay instead of spending all this time doing tons and tons of R&D. Now, I think they have a good plan.
I think you're absolutely right about the kind of not taking things as a given. Like, they start with the core game of what they think is fun, and then say, okay, what works for this core game. And I think that has to be the approach, and you see it constantly. It's why you end up with rather strange debates on forums, and like a couple of questions that we've had today, where people have a very strict mental model of what the game is, and then they hear about a feature of the game, and they apply it to the thing that they've made up, the arbitrary game that exists in their head. They apply it to that, and they go, oh, well, that doesn't work. It's like, no, because that's not the game that they're making. That's the one you invented in the privacy of your own head. And that's fine. Like, it's fine to think, what would my ideal MMO be? But if you take something else from outside and start trying to tack it onto it, it's never going to be ideal.
Well, I'm happy that in this day and age, there's room for all kinds of games. To be successful, it doesn't have to be making $1 billion a month. That might be nice. But you can actually cater to people who want, more niche things. Mm-hmm. And they're getting funded. Like Crowfall, they ended up with 1.7 million, I think. Something ridiculous.
Yeah, they were close to 1.8, I think, with the PayPal stuff as well. So yeah, they're doing.
They got enough
well
to get through the next couple months. You know,
Well, they do. They've got very experienced people there. I'm sure they know how to balance the books. But they've said already they got outside investment as well,
Yeah.
haven't they? So yeah, they'll do all right.
So I think we're about wrapping up for today, and we'll be back in 2 weeks, talking about these games that are still pretty far out. Trying to commit to every week, I think, is a little bit more aggressive than we need to be. But I'm looking forward to doing this again in 2 weeks. And thanks everybody for coming. I really appreciate the discussion. We'll have this up on YouTube one day in the future. Don't pressure me, but it will happen. Everybody else, anybody else have something they say, something they want to promote in the meantime? Locke, you have any videos coming up?
If you go to mmorpg.com to the video section, you'll see stuff that I'm doing. Or if you want to go to sam.com, you can find stuff that I write every Saturday. And I've got some other things coming up that I can't talk about.
Oh.
But there's a little teaser.
Wow.
In the future, events will transpire. So
I love events.
that's something for you to think about. Yeah,
See.
that's it.
I really have nothing to promote. I'm thinking about trying to stream eventually.
You
Do it,
should,
man.
It's fun.
We'll see.
Hey,
Oh, yeah.
Uni, how good am I in stream chat, Zube? I'll be in your stream. I'll be all up in that
Nice.
chat. I'll be caressing your
Well,
gorgeous,
Oh, yeah.
precious chat.
I forgot Ko is going to be doing the alpha video later. I think at 1 Eastern, so we got a couple hours before.
Oh, cool.
Came out Unchained. So
Oh, sweet.
I haven't even seen that yet. So it'll be interesting seeing what that looks like. So
Good times.
All right. Well, if for people who come and hang out for little gaming talk shows on the Theory Forge channel, we've got the Revival show tomorrow at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Hopefully, Velix is finished moving and he shows up to run his show. Otherwise, we'll make sure it goes on the air. So, thanks again, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.
Bye, guys.
bye.